Hey everybody, Dr. Rick Wallace dropping in here. I'm not one for delayed end. That's just me, and I know some people have no problem with that. I see the people. If I see someone pop in, I'll say hello to them. Normally, it only shows me the number of people. It only tells me who they are if they actually chime in on the chat. If I see them and I recognize them, I say hello. If they've been here a few times, I acknowledge them, and I keep it moving. It's nothing personal. It's just the way that I move. I'm really trying to get into what I'm talking about and get things going. On that note, I want to encourage everybody to continue to show your love and support for what's going on and with the work that we're doing at the Odyssey Project. If you followed me for the 10 years plus that we've been on YouTube and all of the other social media platforms, the website or whatever, you know the work we do. Black Men Lead, Restoring Ghettos Forgotten Daughters, the Black Empowerment Initiative, the new initiative we have on mental health, which is a major issue in the Black community that is not being adequately and sufficiently addressed. So we're doing all those things. You can go to the site at www.theodysseyproject21.top and check out the work we're doing, get all the research, checking in and checking in with us this morning. Look, I'm not going to be very long. I have a client at 9 a.m. CST, which is roughly about 32 minutes. They're very understanding. So if I happen to go over, they won't be upset, but I would like to get off of here on time so I can go ahead and get started with them. But I wanted to be here to talk to you about this. I'm going to be back to go more in depth on it, but it was brought to my attention last week in dealing with all of the stuff that's going on with COVID-19. And at the time, it was a lot of self-reporting that I was just picking up on. And I'm saying, okay, that's interesting. And I wondered how widespread was it? And see room for a doctor's visit or whatever. And they were saying they were not tested for COVID because of limited tests. But on the diagnosis, they were being diagnosed as having the virus. And I want to get into a little bit of the specifics of how this is done normally. At that point, I'm going, okay, that's not how this should be done. That's a way of manipulating numbers. That's a way of saying we've got this many cases when you have no way of actually validating that. That's a way of boosting numbers and boosting fear. Fear is a manipulative tactic within social constructs to drive people to do what you want them to do, especially and specifically lean towards vaccines, allow you to take away their freedoms like freedom to move about and all that. And again, this is not me in any way advocating irresponsibility in the way that we deal with this virus. My family and I are under a shelter in place thing with that we were under before, the way that we go out with both of us, being business owners, so we could work from home with no problem. The kids are home from school. We only leave out to go to the store and to jog around the neighborhood, keeping distance from anybody. And luckily, the people in the neighborhood and so forth. When we come back in, we immediately wash our hands and we steam. We use more of a citrus steam where we've got lemons and oranges and limes, and we put onions in there and we steam. And the purpose for that is twofold to read and understand about this particular virus is it prefers a drier surface. So when there's a humid atmosphere, period, it doesn't do well and it cannot penetrate the esophagus and the throat or whatever and work its way into the lungs where it wreaks havoc. And so that's one way. The other way is that the steam is hot and this virus doesn't do well in heat. So we're looking at that. So far, we have no up and suggesting irresponsible behavior. Matter of fact, I've been speaking on it and calling it out. What I'm saying is that you have to be aware of the facts and not be so willing to receive reports of numbers that have not been verified or that you don't truly understand. There's a way of manipulating numbers in order to get certain results and to push certain agendas, and you have to be aware of all this stuff. If you haven't read, if you haven't developed and gained an understanding of how things work in the political world, how things work in the social world, how things work in the financial world, this is going to take you for a loop, because there are a number of games being played, a number of agendas being pushed, and everybody has a corner that they're fighting out of and pushing. And we are watching it play out. And what we will tend to do, and what our history has proven that we will tend to do, is to allow our emotions to actually take hold and guide our movement and our decision making. And that could cost us dearly. And so I just want to talk to you about something here, because there's been this thing. Well, first of all, that was this big push. Maybe some of you last week, that was this push by the quote unquote Surgeon General and a couple of other people like Dr. Fauci that was sitting up saying that this past week that we just went through was going to be the worst possible, the worst week in cases and deaths of the coronavirus in America, period. It was going to be catastrophic. It was going to be over 100,000, blah, 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 right? And so we kept up every day. We kept up with the numbers reporting that numbers on the decline, but we were paying attention to it. Now the numbers are on decline all around the world and in most states in Texas. Obviously, there's a problem going on in New Orleans, but that was based off of a very poor leadership decision to allow Mardi Gras to take place when such a pandemic was on the horizon or had already been talked about, whether it was being underplayed or not. That was something that shouldn't have happened. They put money before the people, and the people who are going to be most impacted by it are going to be the people most susceptible and vulnerable to it. Those who have pre-existing conditions, the elderly, and that normally formulates within a certain level of the socioeconomic sphere, along the lines of poverty. People who have poor lifestyles tend to eat poorly, come from cultures that eat poorly, come from histories that eat poorly, have conditions like heart disease, have conditions like diabetes, have conditions like kidney disease, and so forth, that are all susceptible to this virus. And so now you put them all in, fortunately. But as on a grand scale, we've got a lot of numbers that even if they're going up, they're not going up anywhere near the rate that would justify the predictions for last week. But we kept up with them and nowhere close to anything that they predicted. And they got real quiet about it. They started talking about, some are starting to push the date back. Others are starting to backtrack on the predictions and a bunch of other things. The whole thing was the predictions were to scare people. Because the math just simply did not make sense. Again, I'm not suggesting or advocating irresponsibility. I'm not suggesting that this virus does not exist. I'm not suggesting that you go out and pretend that everything is okay. What I am suggesting is to pay attention to the facts. There are far more people dying from the flu during this flu season than there are dying from COVID-19. And that it will probably be the case. The flu kills about 600,000 people worldwide every year. We haven't gotten to those numbers yet. Will we with COVID-19? Not sure. But what we do know is that there's a big push in the talk about vaccine. Matter of fact, you go to ESPN 2 days ago, and there's this conversation with Stephen A. Smith, Max Kellerman, and Jason Williams. And Jason Williams and Max Kellerman are literally advocating and pushing vaccine like I've never seen. And this is a sports channel. And the conversation was about whether or not sports is going to return, which shouldn't be a big issue, except for it's a very powerful economy within the social. Because a lot of people besides athletes are making a living within that industry. So it does have a important impact in that level, on that level. But they kept talking about until we have a vaccine. So obviously we understand where that particular paradigm, idea, concept, or agenda is being pushed on that particular channel. But everybody's talking about a vaccine. So you have to understand it as far as big pharma is concerned, as far as population control is concerned, as far as the vaccine side of the agenda thing is being pushed. And then there's the political, geopolitical, global economics and so many other things that are being played out that you have to really have an understanding of what's going on, because it's being played from multiple places. There isn't one agenda pushing against another agenda. There are multiple agendas who are trying to manipulate and use this particular pandemic as a means of accomplishing a particular goal to see it unfold. And I'm not going to get off into the whole 5G thing. I've taken some time to explain that and what that means, and that I'm really real neutral on that, because all of the studies out there are either being funded by those in favor of 5G, or funded by those who have a very strong objection to 5G. And that means that you really don't have a lot of independent studies that provide the balance of understanding what's going on. But I do understand the science of it. And I've explained that, and I'll come back and I'll keep revisiting that. But the focus right now is, it doesn't matter where this virus came from. It does matter how we deal with it. It does matter how we respond to the way we are being guided and pushed, being given the test. Okay, number one is that boosts the numbers. Number two, once you've been diagnosed with it, it gives the connectivity that if something does happen while you are ill and you pass away, that they can, based off of guidelines that are being pushed by state health regulators, based off of information being fed to them by the CDC. There's an article I came across, that is why I'm here. A state senator in Minnesota, who just happens to be a practicing physician, talked about an email he got from the Board of Health in his state that connected him to a link to the CDC that says that it is okay to not just diagnose a patient with having COVID-19 without running the proper tests, but to actually put cause of death on a death certificate of someone who has passed away as being a result of COVID-19, without even having proof that they had it. Now, to give you an idea of how significant this is, let's take the flu. During a high strain that was out last year, was very, not this flu season, but the previous one, was very resistant to the flu vaccine that was out. It was very resistant, so it was wreaking havoc. And so it was common for people to come in with symptoms to their doctors of the flu and being diagnosed with it without running the tests because of how high the epidemic was. So that part of it isn't that big of a deal, except for the fact that if the patient died, at the very most that they could put on the death certificate, if they hadn't tested for it, had to be presumed. It couldn't be an automatic. But in most cases, they would not put it if they couldn't be certain. It is very uncommon to pay for medical personnel, doctors specifically, to play loose with what they put on the cause of the death. Most of the time, they will put undetermined if they don't know. They have been given free reign to sit up and, first of all, diagnose a patient with having it without testing it. Number two, put it down as the primary cause of death without even knowing if the patient had it or not. All they had to do in order to do this is that the patient had to be in contact with someone else that was known. With that, you've got to now assume that there are a significant amount of people in the US who have been diagnosed with COVID-19 who don't have it. Now, on the flip side, we're going to play this fair, because this isn't a conspiracy theory. This is an awareness seminar. This is about gathering the facts so we can make a conscious and educated choice about how we're going to view this thing, right? This isn't me pushing a diagnosed with COVID-19 who don't have it. There are people out there who have it and haven't been diagnosed. So but you've got to scientifically, if you're going to have numbers that are being counted as real, there has to be a scientific margin of error that is taken into consideration when you're going to put those numbers out. How many people, based off how many tests we're giving per 100,000 people in this country, have it? But a lot of different variables have to come into place: geographical location, population density. So many other things have to be taken into place. And they're not talking about any of this stuff when they're throwing that stuff out there to you. They're telling you, hey, this many people. Okay? And the truth of the matter is, first of all, when a person, and you got to understand all this, and I want you to really and truly understand this because it's immensely important. You have to understand this. A person can be diagnosed, literally tested for COVID-19, have COVID-19, pass away, and not have passed away from COVID-19. The most extreme example of this is a patient comes in relatively healthy, but a little concerned. Because they came in contact with someone who they know has now tested positive for it. They just want to get tested to be safe. And there's also this thing going around now of who gets tested and who doesn't, and how that measures out and plays out across the socioeconomic ladder. And so a lot of things in play. But just say the person comes in and they get tested and they test positive for it, but all it's for all intents and purposes, they're still healthy. They just test positive for it. But while there, they slip and fall and hit their head and they pass away from severe head trauma, right? They didn't die from COVID-19. Or they have a heart attack while they're there. They tested positive for it, but they had coronary heart disease, or they had a blocked artery like yours truly, and they had a heart attack and passed away at the they didn't die from COVID-19. So the assumption that everybody that attracts it and died from it is got to, and so all of these things have to be, so in truth, you can't confirm it without some form of posthumous examination, like an autopsy. You can assume it. Now, if you've got a situation where people are on ICU because they're struggling with the virus, and it's set up pneumonia, some other type of pulmonary difficulty or challenge, then you can sit up and say, okay, it was due to COVID-19 because this happened, that happened, and this is where it led to. Okay, but you got a lot of people who have other things that are potentially fatal before COVID-19 ever hit the surface. So just because they come up with it and get sick doesn't mean that they died from it. And you have to be careful when ascertaining and determining this, because these numbers are going to present a certain reality through which people are going to judge the impact of this disease. And when you have certain outcomes that are going to be a response to the impact of this disease, you want the numbers to be as accurate as possible. You don't want people playing loose with numbers for the sake of pushing agendas. And so you need to be aware of this. And that's the reason I'm bringing it to you, point blank and simple, that we need to be aware of what's going on and how these numbers are being played. Now, this isn't me going out and drawing conclusions. Like, even when I had people popping up on my thread or texting and emailing me, telling me, look, they diagnosed me with COVID-19 without ever running the COVID-19 test, and they sent me a copy of their lab report. No COVID-19 test on the lab report, but a diagnosis of COVID-19. It's added to the number of COVID-19 cases in a particular area, region, country, state, city, whatever. Okay, so now you have this situation in which you are looking at numbers that don't line up, and you're asking, how is it happening? This is just one of the reasons and ways that it's happening. So in essence, what I'm trying to get everyone to understand is the importance of paying attention and doing the research. I keep talking about that. It's time to do the research. It's time to sit up and really truly understand what's going on and do the research to understand how things are playing out, how things are being done, and have an awareness of it at a level that allows you to make educations. And so I just want to come out and put that on you guys. I'm about to get off of here so I can get to what I need to do with my client in about a few minutes. But I just wanted to drop that on you guys. So you guys have a great day. And I'm going to get out of here. Don't forget to show your love and support for the work we're doing. The information on how you can do that is always going to be in the first paragraph of the description box. And on that note, I am out of here. Have a great one.